campus of Clemson University, where much research in the field of special education is being done every day. Today, I will be moderating our discussion on inclusion. My name is Joyce Pickett. My experience has been in a clinical day program working with students with severe emotional disabilities at the high school level. We have Mitzi Tannery. Mitzi?
My name is Mitzi Tannery. I've been teaching for 5 years with students with moderate disabilities, and I do all the elementary grades.
Okay. And Amy?
Hi, my name is Amy Snyder, and I've been teaching for 13 years, all of them with children with special needs, and I am currently teaching children with mild to moderate intellectual disabilities in grades from 2 through 5.
Okay. Today, our topic is inclusion. It's an extremely controversial one in our schools. The very definition of inclusion varies greatly from state to state, from school district to school district. So before we begin, let's try to define inclusion. Amy?
Well, of course, the push for inclusion is increasing thanks to federal legislation that's been passed in 2004. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Improvement Act, otherwise known as IDEA, mandates that all students, regardless of their disabilities, should be educated in the least restrictive environment, as deemed appropriate, of course, by their IEP team. What this means is that students should be included in the schools and educated with non-disabled peers to the greatest extent appropriate. I think we'll discuss that later. In practice, that means that Gen Ed classroom teachers, in cooperation with special education teachers, should provide accommodations and modifications to allow those students with special needs, as well as all students, to access the curriculum to the best of their abilities and have good academic progress.
I fully agree. And we also need to remember, in addition to that, we need to have that continuum of services. We need to have flexibility, and we need to look at the student as a whole body and not just bits and pieces, but we need to look at the whole child and flexibility, flexibility, flexibility.
Absolutely.
I totally agree, Mitzi. My experience for some students, the least restrictive environment has actually been in a more restrictive setting than the general education classroom, such as a classroom specifically designed to address the student's individual special needs. I find that this tends to occur more frequently with students that display severe emotional disabilities.
I agree. And isn't it a good thing that there's a team of professionals that make these decisions about where the most appropriate place is for children?
Absolutely.
That is a huge decision, and I'm so glad the parents are also included.
Yes. Now that we have defined inclusion as we see it, what benefits have you observed, Amy?
Well, I'm going to be speaking today with a background as a resource teacher who has successfully gone into the Gen Ed classroom to do an inclusion program. And one of the main benefits for children who typically get a more restrictive classroom because of their abilities is that they get access to that curriculum that's on the Gen Ed classroom level, which ultimately they are accountable for knowing thanks to our state assessments.
Yes.
As a teacher in a classroom just for children with special needs, it's extremely hard to cover science and social studies across 3 and 4 different grade levels, and to do it with any depth that has any meaning for the students. Something that I can offer to Gen Ed teachers is that with my background, I have more access and knowledge about the research-based teaching methods, which of course No Child Left Behind has pushed to the forefront of education. One of my absolute favorite websites is teachingld.org, because they issue current practice alerts with recommendations that you could go for it because things are research-based, or maybe used with caution because the research isn't there yet, but they are promising practices. And that gives you a quick way to look and make sure that you are teaching the most effective way that you can be. And some things that I can bring into the classroom that the Gen Ed teachers may not be aware of are strategies like graphic organizers, or reading comprehension instruction, or especially the direct instruction techniques that special education is so well known for using and getting results. Of course, in addition to the academics, I'm also a great behavior resource for teachers. We have all kinds of strategies to increase motivation, to help modify behavior, even for the children like you and I have experience with, the more in-depth functional behavior assessment allows us not only to address the behavior occurring, but also all the circumstances leading up to it. Of course, with the goal of preventing the behavior or teaching appropriate alternate behaviors to those students. And I know you'll all agree collaboration is just the key to everything that teachers need to talk and share.
Collaboration is the key. And for students on a more moderate disability level, those students, in addition to those with the milder disability, still need to be included with their gen ed peers. However, we have to remember that the law says as appropriate and not just as possible. So appropriate may not mean in full academic cases, and that's what I see with my students. Instead, they need instruction with toileting, self-help skills, such as feeding, and those are not covered in gen ed classrooms. So for the more academic content, it still is very beneficial for these students to be removed from those classes and be in a more restrictive environment where they can receive some one-on-one or small group instruction. But as I said, it's still important for them to be with their non-disabled peers, because who better for them to see the modeling of appropriate behaviors? They're not going to see that if they're staying with students who all have behavioral needs. So they need to be incorporated into those general classrooms. That may be for lunch, for recess. It could be for specials such as PE, art, library, music. And those are times where everybody's on more of a level playing field. And we want to have that acceptance. And as you said, Amy, we need that collaboration, because the gen ed teachers are having to expand their circle of tolerance. These students come with special needs. They need accommodations that are going to have to be made in the classrooms, and maybe for communication purposes. So collaboration is going to be a huge key for that. And again, all we're asking is for acceptance. You know, I'm not asking for anybody to get my students on that academic level. I'm just asking for acceptance and that they have an opportunity to see appropriate behaviors.
Well, and that's where that communication comes in, by clearly communicating our expectations for what our students will get in that classroom. I think everyone can really get on board and be supportive.
Absolutely.
Yes. And I liked your emphasis, Mitzi, on the small classroom ratio. All learners, we want all of our learners to benefit. And there's research that supports that a small classroom ratio, the teacher can give more intensive instruction, she can get to know that student better, and the child's more receptive, just like we are. If someone knew exactly what our needs were and met all our needs, we're more receptive to what they're trying to teach us.
Exactly.
And then another point that's a benefit to all students is using different strategies. Research on differentiated instruction indicates greater student success. Tasks need to be delivered at that child's ability level. And oftentimes teachers say, I don't have the time to do all of this individual planning. So that's an item that we need to continue to work on, is allowing general ed and special education to have this time to individually differentiate instruction. Another method that research supports is peer tutoring. Class-wide peer tutoring, or CWPT, is a peer-assisted instructional strategy. Pairs of students take turns tutoring each other to reinforce the concepts and skills that their teacher has taught to them. Research indicates significant increases in reading fluency and in the child's comprehension. And I know in closing that we all agree that no general student is singled out when help is needed. So why should that child in special education be singled out? We want the needs of all students to be addressed.
Exactly, and it's certainly much easier when you have two people in the room who are able to immediately interact with children, all of the children.
All children need to be included and accepted for who and what they are.
We all agree. Well, ladies, from this discussion, we can all see that inclusion definitely has its benefits for some students, but it's crucial to have the proper supports and open lines of communication. Now we're going to break for a commercial. Stay tuned for the latest controversy on school lunches. Are they really healthy?